today's episode of Easy Publishing to the Central Repository, we're going to get our first deployment of a little Maven project happening and see what happens in terms of feedback and if there's any further steps we need to do. So we're looking here at the OSSRH guide on the documentation website, and you remember we created our Jira account, we got all the access rights ready to go, and now we're going to do a deployment of our project. We're going to use Apache Maven. The website here documents all the other tools as well, but this is our example we're going to play with. And specifically, we're going to add the distribution management into our project and then use and configure the correct settings. I have a very minimalistic Maven project here, and I've inserted the distribution management section here with the URL for OSSRH here to the snapshot repository in the snapshot repository section. And for the release repository, we have the staging URL for our Maven deployments, which is the deployment URL you're going to use for all different tools. In addition, I've set up my settings.xml here with the same identifier OSSRH used in the distribution management and my user tokens for my access to the central repository. You can see the identifier here and here. Before our first deployments, we just have to confirm that we are deploying into the right namespace, and in this case here com.simpleagility is the namespace my account is allowed to deploy into, and I'm inside it somewhere. In this case I created another nested sort of location called training, and in that I put an OSSRH demo project. And so I should be able to deploy this snapshot version already to this snapshot repository. So let's try that out. The command to use for a deployment in Maven here would be maven deploy, and that will build the project and go all the way to deploying it to the target repository, which in this case would be the snapshot repository. So let's see if this works. You see it builds everything, runs through the tests and so on, and here the Maven deploy plugin does an upload to the repository URL. To check that the deployment actually worked, we can just check out this URL. So we can take the URL and look at it in the browser, and we see that the snapshot version 1.0 snapshot is available, and in fact that the jar and POM files here for multiple deployments are already here. So our snapshot deployment with our credential setup worked. Let's do a release next. To do a release, all we have to do is make sure that the version does not end up in -snapshot as a string, and then we can run a build here. Let's, for example, run it here as Maven build, and we can call this clean deploy, and we should see the deployment to the repository manager, this time in the IDE. Again, the Maven deploy plugin kicks in. Now this time it deploys to the deployments URL that we have configured that points to the staging URL, and then in there. So let's see in the repository manager where we can see and inspect this upload. Inspecting this deployment has to be done in the user interface of the repository manager on OSSRH, and we can do that by logging in. You see I'm logged in as my simpleagility user, and I can go to the build promotion menus staging repository. And at the very bottom here, there is one that's called com simpleagility, which is my kind of profile. And I can check out the content here and the activity. You see that it was deployed. That's the activity of that happened. We see here the repository was open and created. And we can check out the content, and it is right in that folder structure that we have access to com simpleagility and then something underneath. And there is our jar and our POM. This content to the central repository, we have to just close and then release this staging repository. So we have selected here, I can press close and say it's ready to go. I press confirm, and the operation is in progress. I have to refresh and see what the results are. And if I look at the list here, I see that in the activity there were a whole bunch of failures, so it did not actually close. And those failures are the indication that some of the quality of our defects that are deployed is not sufficient. So we can see here that the POM was not correct. We missed some information. We did not supply JavaDoc, we did not supply sources, and we did not sign our artifacts. So these quality control measures are in place and we need to fulfill them. How we do that, we'll find out next time.